Throughout history, power has been wielded by many, but in the hands of some it became a weapon of unimaginable destruction. From orchestrating genocides and mass purges to launching wars that left millions dead, these leaders weren't just controversial, they were catastrophic. This isn't just a list of tyrants, it's a chilling journey through the darkest chapters of human history. These are the rulers whose names are etched in blood, whose legacies are soaked in suffering. Stay with us as we count down the top 5 deadliest leaders in history, figures whose ruthless ambition reshaped nations and devastated lives. Slobodan Milosevic was the president of Serbia and later the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia during the bloody collapse of the Balkans in the 1990s. His name became synonymous with ethnic cleansing, nationalism, and genocide in the heart of Europe. Under Milosevic's leadership, Yugoslavia disintegrated into a series of devastating wars in Bosnia, Croatia, and Kosovo. His nationalist policies and support for Serbian militias fueled widespread atrocities. The goal? Create a greater Serbia by purging non-Serbs from contested areas. During the Bosnian War, 1992-1995, Serb forces backed by Milosevic committed mass killings, rape, and displacement. The most horrific example was the Srebrenica massacre, where over 8,000 Bosniak Muslim men and boys were executed in just a few days. Europe's worst atrocity since World War II. In Croatia, ethnic cleansing campaigns forced out hundreds of thousands of Croats and Muslims. And in Kosovo, Milosevic's forces launched another brutal assault, killing thousands of ethnic Albanians and displacing nearly 1 million people. In total, Milosevic's actions contributed to the deaths of over 100,000 people, along with the displacement of millions. His regime used propaganda, media control, and nationalist rhetoric to inflame centuries-old ethnic divisions into full-scale war. In 2001, he was arrested and handed over to the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, in The Hague. He was charged with genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, becoming the first sitting European leader to face such charges since Nuremberg. He died in prison in 2006 before his trial concluded. Milosevic's legacy is one of broken nations, grieving families, and a reminder that even in the modern era, hate-fueled authoritarianism can spark atrocities on a horrifying scale. Arguably one of the most sinister imperial rulers in modern history, King Leopold II of Belgium never set foot in the Congo he claimed as personal property. Yet his colonial regime led to the deaths of 10 million people under the guise of bringing civilization and Christianity to Africa. Leopold established the Congo Free State as a massive forced labor camp to extract rubber and ivory. The system relied on terror. Villages were burned, hostages were taken, and those who resisted were mutilated, most famously cutting off the hands of workers, including children, who didn't meet quotas. The Force Publique, Leopold's brutal private army, enforced these quotas with extreme violence. Women were raped, men were executed, and entire communities were destroyed. The global outcry eventually forced the Belgian government to take over the colony in 1908. But by then, millions had died from murder, starvation, and disease. Leopold, too, never faced consequences. In Belgium, he was initially celebrated. Only later did the truth of his crimes become widely known, his exploitation of an entire region for personal wealth, resulting in a death toll that rivals the Holocaust, makes him one of the most quietly monstrous figures in world history. Often called Africa's Pinochet, Hissène Habré ruled Chad with terror and left a legacy of systematic torture, ethnic massacres, and war crimes that earned him the distinction of being the first African leader convicted of crimes against humanity by another African country. Coming to power through a coup in 1982, Habré immediately consolidated control using his ruthless secret police, the DDS, Documentation and Security Directorate. His regime is believed to have killed over 40,000 people and tortured tens of thousands more. Habré's violence was largely directed at ethnic groups he viewed as threats, especially the Sara and Hajarai peoples. His prisons were sites of unimaginable cruelty, where victims were electrocuted, burned, raped, and mutilated. Human rights groups described his rule as one of the most brutal on the continent. He also launched war against Libya, partly supported by the West, which saw thousands more perish. Despite this, he remained in power for 8 years before being overthrown in 1990. He fled to Senegal, where he lived in comfort until years of campaigning by survivors led to his arrest. In 2016, Habré was convicted of crimes against humanity, rape and torture, and sentenced to life in prison. He died in 2021. His dictatorship may not be as widely known, but in terms of cruelty and targeted mass murder, Habré's rule stands among the darkest in African history. Enver Pasha, one of the triumvirate leaders of the late Ottoman Empire, was the chief architect behind the Armenian Genocide, one of the first modern genocides of the 20th century. As Minister of War during World War I, Enver aligned the Ottoman Empire with the Central Powers. His military blunders led to massive defeats, including the disastrous Battle of Sarikamish, which left tens of thousands of Ottoman soldiers dead from cold, hunger, and poor planning. But it was Enver's role in the Armenian Genocide, 1915 to 1917, that marks him as one of history's deadliest leaders. Alongside Talat and Jamal Pasha, he initiated the systematic extermination of the Armenian population through mass deportations, death marches, and executions. Up to 1.5 million Armenians, along with hundreds of thousands of Assyrians and Greeks, were murdered under Enver's orders and policies. Women and children were subjected to unspeakable horrors. Entire villages were wiped from existence. After the war, Enver fled the empire and was sentenced to death in absentia. He eventually died in 1922 while trying to ignite a Muslim uprising in Central Asia. His legacy remains one of racial hatred, military incompetence, and the execution of genocide on a continental scale. Benito Mussolini, the founder of Italian fascism, ruled Italy as a dictator for over 2 decades and dragged his country, and much of Europe, into catastrophic conflict. Though often overshadowed by Hitler, Mussolini was a ruthless tyrant in his own right, whose policies and wars led to the deaths of hundreds of thousands. Coming to power in 1922, Mussolini established a fascist dictatorship that crushed dissent through secret police, censorship, and imprisonment. Political opponents were exiled or assassinated. His regime promoted hypernationalism, imperial expansion, and racial superiority. Mussolini's most deadly legacy began with his invasion of Ethiopia in 1935. Italian forces used chemical weapons and mass executions, killing up to 500,000 Ethiopians and committing numerous war crimes. This brutal colonial war shocked the world. During World War II, Mussolini aligned Italy with Nazi Germany. His forces were responsible for civilian massacres in Greece, Yugoslavia, and North Africa, as well as the deportation of thousands of Jews. Though he was eventually overthrown in 1943, Nazi forces rescued him and installed him as the puppet leader of the Italian Social Republic, where atrocities continued until his final capture and execution in 1945. In total, Mussolini's wars and fascist policies are believed to have caused the deaths of over 800,000 people, marking him as not just a political ideologue, but a warmonger whose ambition left a bloody trail across continents. While often portrayed as a stabilizing figure during Nigeria's post-independence chaos, Yakubu Gowon's leadership was responsible for the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War, one of the deadliest conflicts in African history. After a series of coups and ethnic tensions, the southeastern region of Nigeria, dominated by the Igbo ethnic group, declared independence as the Republic of Biafra in 1967. Gowon, then Nigeria's military head of state, launched a full-scale war to suppress the secession. The conflict quickly turned into a humanitarian catastrophe. Gowon's forces implemented a blockade that cut off food and medical supplies to Biafra. turning famine into a weapon. Images of starving Biafran children shocked the world and triggered one of the largest humanitarian responses of the era. By the end of the war in 1970, over 2 million Biafrans, mostly civilians, had died, primarily from starvation and disease. While Gowon claimed victory and proclaimed a policy of no victor, no vanquished, the scars of the war remain etched in Nigeria's ethnic and political tensions today. Though Gowon has maintained a reputation in some circles as a unifier, the scale of civilian suffering and loss of life under his command cements his place in history as one of the most consequential and deadly leaders in modern Africa. As the leader of the fascist Ustaše regime in the independent state of Croatia during World War II, Ante Pavelić orchestrated one of the most savage genocidal campaigns in the Balkans. Backed by Nazi Germany and fascist Italy, Pavelić set out to create a racially pure Croatian state by exterminating Serbs, Jews, and Roma populations. The Ustaše regime launched a campaign of terror that shocked even their Nazi allies. Concentration camps, most infamously Jasenovac, became sites of unimaginable cruelty. Victims were not just executed, but tortured to death, mutilated and killed with bladed weapons in what historians describe as sadistic rituals. Under Pavelić's orders, over 300,000 Serbs, 30,000 Jews, and 25,000 Roma were killed between 1941 and 1945. Thousands more were forcibly converted to Catholicism or deported. The brutality was so severe that even Nazi officials complained. In Jasenovac, guards often competed to see who could kill the most prisoners in a single day using knives and hammers. Women and children were not spared. It was genocide by hand, personal, direct, and vicious. After the Axis defeat, Pavelić fled Europe and eventually found refuge in Argentina and later Spain. He died in 1959 from injuries sustained in an assassination attempt by Yugoslav agents. Pavelić's legacy is one of hate-fueled nationalism, religious extremism, and methodical genocide, earning him a place among the deadliest ideologues of the 20th century. Enver Hoxha turned Albania into one of the most isolated, paranoid, and repressive regimes in modern Europe. After World War II, he rose to power as the communist leader of Albania and ruled for over 40 years with a grip so tight that the country became a dystopia of fear, surveillance, and state control. Hoxha's government was notorious for its brutal suppression of religion, banning all forms of worship, and declaring Albania the world's first atheist state. Churches and mosques were demolished, religious leaders imprisoned or executed, and worship became a punishable offense. He created a vast network of labor camps and prisons for political dissenters, intellectuals, or even those who wore Western clothing. Tens of thousands were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. The Sigurimi, his secret police, watched every citizen. Friends and family were forced to inform on each other or face death. Paranoid about foreign invasion, Hoxha ordered the construction of over 170,000 concrete bunkers across Albania. These expensive fortifications drained resources from an already impoverished population. Meanwhile, famine and poverty ravaged the country due to collectivized agriculture and economic mismanagement. The estimated death toll from executions, purges, labor camps, and starvation during Hoxha's rule ranges from 100,000 to 250,000 people. His isolationist policies left Albania culturally and economically crippled for decades after his death in 1985. Better known as Mobutu Sese Seko, the self-proclaimed savior of Zaire, ruled the mineral-rich Central African nation for over 3 decades. His reign is one of the most extreme examples of kleptocracy and authoritarianism in African history, marked by political repression, mass deaths, and economic ruin. Mobutu seized power in 1965 after a military coup, soon establishing a one-party state and declaring himself president for life. He banned all political opposition, centralized power, and created a sprawling secret police network to silence dissent. His regime was characterized by systematic human rights abuses, including torture, extrajudicial killings, and the disappearance of thousands of political enemies. During the Shaba invasions and various rebellions, government forces massacred civilians and committed widespread atrocities. While Mobutu may not have orchestrated genocide on the scale of others on this list, his misrule directly contributed to millions of deaths through state collapse, starvation, disease, and civil war. His economic plundering, estimated at over 5 billion, drained national resources, collapsing healthcare, education, and infrastructure systems. His reign ended in 1997 when Laurent Kabila's rebel forces advanced, prompting Mobutu to flee into exile. He died later that year in Morocco. What followed was the Second Congo War, dubbed Africa's World War, resulting in over 5 million deaths, many directly traceable to the chaos and corruption of Mobutu's legacy. Rafael Trujillo, often called El Jefe, ruled the Dominican Republic with an iron grip for over 30 years. His regime was a terrifying mixture of militarism, cult of personality, and brutal suppression that turned the Caribbean nation into a personal fiefdom. Trujillo's reign began in 1930 after a military coup. From the outset, he centralized power, eliminated opposition, and built a vast security apparatus that spied on and terrorized the population. Political assassinations and forced disappearances were common. Estimates suggest between 20,000 and 30,000 people were killed under his regime. One of his most infamous acts was the Parsley Massacre of 1937. Seeking to Dominicanize the border region, Trujillo ordered the slaughter of up to 30,000 Haitian men, women, and children living in the area. Soldiers used the pronunciation of the Spanish word perejil, parsley, to distinguish Haitians from Dominicans. Those who failed were executed on the spot. Trujillo's cult of personality was extreme. Towns, schools, and even the capital city were renamed in his honor. His face appeared on every coin and every classroom wall. Despite controlling all aspects of life, he maintained the illusion of democracy through rigged elections and puppet politicians. He was finally assassinated in 1961, ending a reign marked by cruelty and egotism. Though smaller in scale than some, genocides, Trujillo's systematic repression, and targeted ethnic killings secure him a grim place among the world's deadliest rulers. Though in power for only about 100 days, John Kambanda, interim Prime Minister of Rwanda, during the 1994 genocide, holds a unique and chilling place in history. He is the only head of government to have pleaded guilty to genocide before an international court. Following the assassination of Rwandan President Juvenal Habyarimana in April 1994, extremist Hutu factions seized control of the government. Kambanda, a technocrat and member of the ruling party, was quickly appointed prime minister by the genocidal regime that emerged. What followed was one of the most horrific episodes of the 20th century, the Rwandan genocide. In just 100 days, approximately 800,000 to 1 million Tutsi and moderate Hutu were slaughtered, often with machetes, clubs, and improvised weapons. It was a genocide carried out not by high-tech militaries, but by neighbors, co-workers, and even family members, egged on by state propaganda and extremist radio broadcasts. Kambanda not only supported the genocide, he distributed weapons and encouraged mass killings in speeches. After fleeing the country, he was arrested in Kenya in 1997 and brought before the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR. In 1998, he pled guilty to genocide and crimes against humanity and was sentenced to life in prison. His short, rule and direct complicity in mass murder cement his place as one of the most destructive leaders in history. Slobodan Milosevic was the Serbian nationalist leader who presided over the violent breakup of Yugoslavia, one of the most complex and blood-soaked conflicts in post-World War II Europe. His role in the Bosnian, Croatian, and Kosovo wars made him responsible for war crimes, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. Milosevic rose to power on a wave of Serbian nationalism, exploiting ethnic tensions across the former Yugoslav republics. He armed and supported Serb militias, who carried out brutal campaigns against Croats, Bosniaks, Bosnian Muslims, and ethnic Albanians. During the Bosnian War, 1992-1995, Serbian forces, with his backing, conducted the siege of Sarajevo and orchestrated the Srebrenica massacre, where over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were executed in a matter of days, Europe's worst atrocity since the Holocaust. The Kosovo War followed, with Serbian forces accused of mass killings, rapes, and the displacement of over 800,000 ethnic Albanians. Milosevic's use of propaganda, state media, and secret police fueled an atmosphere of hatred and paranoia. He was finally overthrown in 2000 and arrested the following year. In 2002, he became the first sitting head of state to face trial for war crimes before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY. He died of a heart attack in 2006 before a verdict was reached. Milosevic's wars left over 100,000 dead and millions displaced. His legacy, a shattered region scarred by ethnic hatred. General Aga Muhammad Yahya Khan, Pakistan's third president and chief martial law administrator, oversaw one of the shortest yet bloodiest military regimes in South Asian history. His rule culminated in the Bangladesh Liberation War, during which his army unleashed a campaign of terror that led to genocide. After suspending Pakistan's constitution and assuming control in 1969, Yahya promised to restore democracy. But when the Awami League, representing the Bengali population of East Pakistan, won a majority in the 1970 national elections, he refused to hand over power. Instead, he launched Operation Searchlight in March 1971 to crush Bengali nationalism. What followed was a brutal military crackdown in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Cities like Dhaka saw universities raided, intellectuals and students executed, and entire neighborhoods burned. Women were systematically raped, many in so-called rape camps, and civilians were massacred indiscriminately. Hindu minorities were specifically targeted. The death toll is still debated, but estimates range from 300,000 to over 3 million people killed. Tens of millions of refugees fled to India, prompting the Indo-Pakistani War of December 1971. Pakistan suffered a crushing defeat, and Bangladesh gained independence. Yahya Khan resigned in disgrace shortly thereafter, replaced by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Despite his short time in power, Yahya is remembered for one of the most catastrophic military and humanitarian disasters of the 20th century.